on socialBites. socialBites, as we know, is a campaign on a platform that tries to increase the traffic to restaurants in Dortmund, Germany, by connecting these restaurants to social media clients. That's really what it's about. So the platform is called socialBites, but the campaign is also called socialBites, and we want to build an app which works as a web app and a mobile app to deliver the solution. Okay. So today's meeting will review the work and we'll get into the next steps so that we have a sense of our trajectory, how we're working. I'll explain what we should have done by now, and then I'm going to ask you to present what you've done, and then we'll discuss the next steps. Okay, Nelly, so maybe I start with the explanation just so that we're on the same page. If you go by the activity book, the workbook which I gave you, I think you have a workbook, don't you? You do, don't you? You can remind me. Did I give you a workbook?
Yes.
I did. Okay, so you have the steps through. And I believe we had discussed that the first 4 tasks should be the substance of week 1, 2, and 3. We're in week 3 now. Week 3 for you technically ends today. If you started on the 10th, let's say. So by today, this is um, so by the end of you should have done up to task 4 on your workbook. That's what we're saying. And if you've done that, maybe what I'll suggest is I'll tell you the workflow in terms of what needs to be done, and then you tell me what you've done, and then from there I'll explain to you the next steps. But when you follow the workbook, you're okay because the workbook is done in this kind of linear way. So our goal is to produce what we're saying is a prototype that can be demonstrated to the client. But at the same time, the main job is not even the prototype. The main job is aligning the motivations of the client with the interests of the users. The primary users, are the restaurant owners. The restaurant owners are represented by people who actually will be using the app in the restaurant. Maybe it'll be waiters, maybe it will be customer care, it could be that. But those are the main users because so they have our main target are those people. But the owner of socialBites is interested in appealing to the restaurants because he wants to monetize at the point where the restaurant feels that there's value here. Once the restaurant feels there's value here, they're going to pay for the service. They'll pay for the subscription. That's the idea. And they have already 500 restaurants. So they want to get these 500 restaurants to pay for the subscription. And if they do, they can build a business around that. That's the whole idea. However, the restaurant imposes on us secondary users who influence their decision. When they say this is a good idea, it's because of traffic of buyers, consumers, who now place orders for their products, for their food. So that's the flow. So when we start, the very first thing we need to understand and have clarity of is the interpretation of the brief. So I just want to mention it for the record. What we're saying is that the client wants us to our client wants us to increase traffic to their restaurant owners using Generation Z and Generation Alpha in Germany so that they see that the app is useful in growing their user base or even their clientele. They want to increase their customers. So the app is useful in increasing the customers. That's one. The reason why the client says this is a unique value proposition is partly because the restaurants are traditionally constituted. They don't have the knowledge on how to grow their clients or their customers using technology. So they want to make use of the app. So now what we need to do is to recognize that and then align these interests. So the first thing is we need to have a persona profile. So an example would be, of course, as we discussed, a man and a woman from Gen Z, for example, that represent a typical client let's say consumer that we will bring. Okay. That's the secondary persona. The primary persona will be the customer care service person, also Gen Z, but working within, you can say, the space of the restaurant. So they're the ones receiving orders. They're the ones in touch with the kitchen. They're in touch with the waiters. They're in touch with the business. They know what's going on the ground. So we're connecting that person to, you can say, their consumer. And the consumer is the person who comes to order, all right, online. And the consumer behavior online is to use the app to place the order. Okay? So we have to have oversight of that. Now, why it matters is that if we know that a Generation Z person who's placing the order is interested in using the app to place the order, then we must connect, you can say, the placement of the order with the um, creation of the product, that's making of the food, with the delivery of the food, with the payment for the food. You see, that involves services that are not within the app. So we have to connect microservices for deliveries, microservices for a mobile payment method, or a Visa payment method. In Germany, it will be more Visa payment method. We have to connect that. And then if they're going to have the food constructed in the restaurant, then we must have access to the menu. And the menu might be changing depending on the season, depending on the time. So we have to have a means by which we can have a time sensitive and a date sensitive menu that is constructed by the restaurant and used by the consumer. You see, so that in some ways is outsourced, but from within the restaurant itself. Okay, so those are the elements, and now we have to build an app that demonstrates how the workflow I've just described to you in words actually works. And as you know, the first step is to do the persona profile so that we have a sense of that. The second step is to build a mental model. What I've described to you is a mental model. However, the big picture is not everything. The big picture is simply this: using the platform to attract more traffic to these restaurants. That's the big picture, you see. And now the restaurants, I mean, the owners will ask, but how will you do that? So that's the real thing. That's the real thing. The big picture is right there. And if in my mind, I would say that the big picture is to take what the restaurant is offering, that the restaurant feels is special, like they have a menu, and that menu might be very special. We take that and we showcase it to Generation Z in a way that Generation Z says, now this is nice. That's the big picture. Okay. Now, if we can do this in a way that is one, competitive, which means any other restaurant that's not doing what we're doing is not able to attract the interest of Generation Z, not the way we are attracting them. In other words, we have a competitive advantage because our competitors do not know how to represent what's in the kitchen in a way that Generation Z will say, now, that's nice. I want that. You see, that's the thing. So it has a competitive advantage. That's one. Number two, it has what we would call a unique value proposition. Okay. And that unique value proposition, we have to be clear on it as well. I mean, this one is that what we do differently from everybody else. Now, the client, our client, has told us the unique value proposition is going to be in the whole digitalization of the restaurant's culture so that they're now using the app within and without. So those who are outside are the consumers, but those who are within are themselves. So that whole culture that is now ordering, paying, and also you can argue inquiring about the menus, that whole process being digitalized will change the restaurant culture. So our unique value proposition, the UVP, is in digitalizing the culture around ordering food. Okay. Now, in some ways, nobody else is doing it, at least within the space of these restaurants. So if we start doing it, then it becomes unique because we're doing it. And how do you digitalize a culture of ordering food? You see, that's the challenge. So we're figuring that out. So number one is the digitalization of the ordering culture for food. Number two is the competitive advantage, which is the showcasing of food in ways that entice the consumer to now start placing orders. And then number three, the comparative advantage. This one looks at the cost benefit. So we should show the client that when they work this way, the price to the consumer of placing an order, even identifying what they want, placing an order and buying the food is cheaper than it would be for them to go to the restaurant, go through the menu, place an order, eat, and pay. So the process of doing it this way is cheaper to the consumer, faster to the consumer than it is now to do it the traditional way. That's one. And number two, for the restaurant themselves, it is cheaper to use the digital method to receive orders, process orders, and then to deliver orders. It's cheaper. It's cheaper and quicker for them to do it that way than it is to do it the traditional way. All right. So that's what we're arguing is our comparative advantage. When you compare to, because every restaurant is having this element of consumers placing orders, consumers, you know, making payments, and consumers having food delivered to them. So that all restaurants are dispatching food. So the process that they're currently using, we're arguing, is less efficient, which means it's slower, it's more costly, and you know, you can argue in terms of quality that it may not happen as efficiently or as precisely as the method that we're using. For example, if there's a problem, how do you report problems? Now, with a digital system, you can report problems along the way. Like if someone's delivering pizza and then they have an accident, how do you report that? You see, so with a digital method, you can. So it has these benefits that are not there, and these improve the efficiency of the whole system. So that's the argument. That's the argument. You see, those three things must come out in our demonstration. It must come out in our prototype. Okay. Yeah. Once it comes out in our prototype, then the restaurants will likely be convinced to come on board. We don't have to convince them. There's a sales team that does that, but the sales team needs to have a unique value proposition. They need to have a competitive advantage and a comparative advantage. And once they have those three, they have now you can say, indicators that they need to persuade now the client. Those are the restaurants. All right. So the second thing you need to do once you've done the persona profile is that mental model that speaks to the UVP, comparative advantage, competitive advantage. You need to speak to that. In fact, the UVP is the main one for the big idea. The unique value proposition, if it's not there, forget everything. Forget it. So let's just say the mental model speaks to the UVP. Okay? So that's number two. Number three, you need to work out the activities. Now, I've spoken of many activities, but even if you look at the pipeline, which is dealing with the big idea, placement, first of all, identification of the food. Number one. Activity number two, selecting what you want. But selecting involves checking out of the system. Okay? So that's number two. Number three involves paying if you're paying in advance. That's activity number three. Number four is receiving on the side of the audience of the restaurant, receiving the order, and they have to receive it in a certain way. So, for example, if it has to be received by a waiter and it comes on the screen, that's appropriate. But it's written in a way that the waiter understands. So once it's received, that's good, because then they can ask the kitchen to prepare this. It has to have the information that's necessary, like the time it's required, the time that the order was made, and things like those. But all the things are there, so we should have a sample of that. So that's activity number three. So number four would be having cooked, would be now delivering. Now, from the system's point of view, delivering simply means engaging a company at a certain time with a pickup and drop-off point. Okay, and getting information from the company on who is doing it. So who is actually coming to deliver and what time. So there's that information is the activity. The activity needs to get that information at the start. And then if it's going to take like 10 minutes, then 10 minutes later, the system should be checking to see that the delivery has been made. When the items are dropped off, it is the consumer who will now confirm that everything is okay. The one who placed the order in the first place. They'll confirm, and that's how you terminate the delivery. That's how it's dispatched. If everything is okay, then it terminates. If it's not okay, what happens? A complaint is raised to the restaurant that this is not okay. All right. So they will now have to deal with that using their method. But at least the system has facilitated a means by which they can be told this is not okay. All right. So that is the flow of events. Um, you need to capture that in the activity scenario diagram. All right. So there are a number of use cases there. But remember, what I've not mentioned in all that, I've not gotten into the payment modalities. Because when you're paying something, if you're using Visa, there's certain entries you have to make and all this. I've not gotten into that. It's not in the big idea, it's not in the UVP. I've not gotten into the issues that relate, let's say, to a delivery app, like let's say Uber Eats. I've not done that because there are modalities and things you have to do when you get into that. It's not in the UVP. The UVP is exactly what I've described, the one that brings and digitalizes the culture of ordering and delivering food for the restaurant. That's where the UVP is. Okay, so that's what we need to bring out in our activity diagram, the scenario diagram. Other scenario diagrams for making payments, other scenario diagrams for dispatching and delivering in a in another app. Those ones are useful, but they're useful at that later stage. Right now, what's going to justify doing this business is that we capture the UVP that's done on our platform. Okay, so you need to capture that one, those activities. So draw the use case diagram for that. Sometimes you need maybe one or two scenarios, each with, let's say, three activities each, maybe. It's up to you. But these activities, you know the method that we normally use for drawing them. You draw according to that method and you show the activities. We need to see that. Okay? This is part of what you're supposed to deliver. And then finally, once that's done, we move to the user stories. The user stories are roughly what I'm describing, but you'll describe them in the user story method so that it's standardized. And at the same time, you'll introduce the acceptance criteria so that within the user stories, we have the solution, what we're actually going to build. Once that's done, then we can now get into the branding. So branding, as you know, is also a straightforward business for a designer. We know how to brand using color schemes, logo types, slogans. You can invent slogans; it's okay. But whichever method you use for the slogans, if you don't have them already, are just tentative. The client will give us those. But do your branding so that we have the color schemes, we have the font types, we have the treatment in terms of layout. We know how it's going to be laid out. So that can be visualized. And once that's done, finally, we move on to the prototype, which is interactive. Okay, so those are described to you in the flow of the workbook. What I'd like you to tell me is what you've done so that we know where we are and which challenges are you having. I'll hand it over to you, Nelly. You can tell me. Go ahead. You can tell me what you've done and what's left.
Okay, so I have done tasks 1 and 2, which includes understanding the client's brief. But as for task 3 and 4, I'm still yet to do. I've really been under pressure of submitting my business plan exam, which I did today. But by the end of the week, I'll have done and completed till task 4.
Okay, so what's task 4 or 3 and 4, which you're saying you
I can't hear you.
what's task 3 and 4?
Um, task 3 is designing a mental model, and task 4 is branding and design.
All right. So is task 2, so task 5 is the persona profile.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. When you say by the end of the week, when do you see that? When will you have done it? When would the end of the week have come?
let's say by Saturday.
Okay. That's by the end of.
Yeah,
So Sunday you'll have that.
yes, I'll have
What
done.
about the persona profile? When will you have done that?
Before the end of next Thursday.
Okay. So that's the next week. So by end of first 3 weeks, have you started filling in your IBL form?
I am planning to fill it today.
All right. So have a sense of the week, the work spread, because we had said that, I think we said the first four, right? The first four
Yeah.
would be filled into the first 3 weeks, right?
Yes.
Okay. So fill it out once every 4 weeks. So that means by end of next week, um, you can now compile a PDF, send it to me, and I'll put in my part of it. Okay. By end of next week. And if we're saying we'll have hit the persona profile, then let's aim for that. If branding's done, that's great, because what will be left would be the scenario diagrams now and the user stories to follow, okay, which are very important based on the UVP before we do the prototype, okay. I'm going to share information with the client after next week. Once you send me the stuff for next week, I'll put together the proposal to the client so that they can see what you've done so far. But you'll need to be steady in terms of now producing. They'll want to see the product. That's what will happen. And we need to go over it back and forth. But the mental model is key. If you understand, if you have a good mental model, then the client will be satisfied and they'll be looking forward now to see how we're implementing that in the actual prototype. But before that, we should have at least our scenarios and user stories before we get to that. We can even do an interaction diagram, but it's not so important at this stage. But it's supplementary. If you have a prototype and an interaction diagram, they'll work together to reinforce each other. They're going in the same direction, so it's okay. But go with this timeline that you've given me so that we can. Um, I'm seeing that we should, by middle of this month, be able to show a prototype to the client, even if it's the first version of the prototype. Okay?
Yeah.
All right then. Do you have any other thing that is going to prevent you from working? Like you said, the business plan prevented you. Do you have supplementaries?
No, I don't have supplementaries.
Do you have any other thing that will keep you from them working?
No, it was only the business plan,
All right. And
and
you
I'm
said that.
done with it. Yeah.
All right then. Okay, so that's good. If you have issues, you can reach me on WhatsApp to let me know. All right.
I wanted to ask, is the mental model, when I draw it, is it like a wireframe, or is it user flow in terms of the structure?
No, the mental model is like the model diagram. A model diagram is showing objects. It's a picture diagram. So it has objects, and then it has arrows that show that items from here move here, and then from there they move there, and then from there they move here. That's how a mental model is. Like in this case, a mental model will be, and then the mental model tries to describe the big idea. And the big idea is based on the UVP. The UVP is the unique value proposition. So a mental model is not, for example, the dispatching of goods. It's not the ordering of the foods because these are secondary services. It's not even to do anything to do with, let's say, you know, it's not a generalized thing that tries to suggest that there are customers placing orders. There's nothing unique in customers placing orders. That's not what it is. So the mental model tries to show what is unique about the business idea. In our case, what is unique about the business idea is the creating of a digital culture around ordering and delivering foods. That digital culture does not exist right now in 500 restaurants on the ground. So what we're saying is that the mental model is trying to show how we're going to digitize the behavior of people within the restaurant. That's what we're saying. Now, the behavior of people within the restaurant maps itself onto the behavior of their consumers. So there's a kind of dialectic relationship between the restaurant workers' behaviors and the consumer. So when we're digitalizing the restaurant, we're also digitalizing the consumer. So what we're saying, what the mental model is saying, is that even though the restaurant is fraternized by a big community of, let's say, consumers, there's another big community of consumers that do not even know the restaurant exists. That's where we're beginning. That's where what we're saying. They don't even know it exists. And what we're arguing is we'll let them know, number one, that it exists. That's part of the big idea. So once they know it exists, then number two, we're going to connect them to the workers in the restaurant. That's number two. When we connect them to the workers in the restaurant, we're going to train the workers on how to do what they do in a way that makes sense to this new consumer. That's number three. Once they're connected and they're doing things in a way that makes sense, it's what they're already doing that they're doing with these guys, but they do it in a way that makes sense. Once they're already or now doing things in a sensible way, the new consumer, number four is we're going to activate the new consumer by making them place orders for food. So that's where the rubber hits the activation. And we're using this new culture, which is all digital. When they're activated and placing orders, then we're going to help the restaurant to close the deal because it's business. So they'll be interested to know, yeah, our system will help you to close the deal. What is closing the deal? Closing the deal is identifying, what you want, paying for it, and having it delivered. So that terminates. That's when the whole thing is closed. Okay? So our system will facilitate that. So that's the end of it. So you see, it involves apps which are quite specific. The first app is, let me say, it involves business processes and apps, the mental model. So the mental model should show the four objects. One object is social media because that's where we have business processes. We go onto social media and start what we can call, engaging stories in social media. That's how we start. Then the mental model should show movement and let's say filtering of prospective consumers from social media. They filter by demographics like age, um, you could say behavior, you could say interests, you could say preferences, but it filters. So once it filters the kind of people, let's say this restaurant is dealing in pizzas, it filters young people who are interested in using technology to order pizzas. It gets that from social media. It transports them to another object, which is on the mental model. This object is the website. Or let's say the website and the web app. So it's the system, the website and the web app. So you transport your social media, you now have an arrow that shows movement to the website. What is moving? You write there field selected consumers. So here you have the media with everyone. But then what moves across selected consumers. These selected consumers, we can describe them. They are now inside our system, which means they're on our website. When they're on our website, we now interest them in the activities of the restaurant. What is that? Well, those are the menus. How do we do it? We do it by showing them interesting, delicious pizzas. So, if today, for example, is Independence Day, well, we have an Independence Day offer. Okay, great. Today is like Sunday, or let's say it's Thursday. So we have a special Thursday dish. So we show them the special Thursday dish. Now, all these are constructed for this audience in a way that is, you can say, quick, um, convincing in terms of the image. And then in terms of the words, interesting. So they're engaged and their attention is high because of the picture and the words. So we have an app that facilitates that makes it happen in a meme that's really targeting them in a way that interests them. By the way, the same meme constructor is also used in social media, but in a different way because that's a different thing. You're just trying to filter out people. But once they come here, it's very menu specific, saying, look, there's this delicious thing. Look, there's this great offer, that kind of thing. So you see, that's happening and it's showing on the mental model that now you're interesting the consumer to place orders. Then you have another object. This third object is the restaurant. But the area of the restaurant that we're interested in is the behavior of the staff. And what we're saying is we're interested in the digital behavior of the staff. So it's not everyone. It's like the waiters and maybe customer care. So customer care are the members of the staff who are online on the system. And their job is to receive and engage with the consumer who is now engaging with them. They're saying, well, I'm interested in this. So is it available? Can I get it? What time? And does it have this or that? They're asking questions. To who? To the restaurant. Now, we have trained the restaurant. So we have a module there that trains them. We train the restaurant on how to interact with the audience, with the people who are asking these questions. Now, the training can just be a video, like a 5-minute tutorial, that's all. And we can have different types. We can have one that deals with problems. We can have one that deals with orders or most frequently asked questions. We can have one video that trains on how to go about the system itself. How do you work your way through the system? So we can have videos that train them. And we design those videos in a way that is easy for them to train. Now, whoever is in customer care or whoever is given the job of dealing with these consumers online, that's the touch point at which we are now introducing a new digital culture. So we introduce this culture through training. Okay. Even waiters are included. So once that's done, we have the third object. It's the staff of the restaurant. Now, information now moves from point 2 to point 3. What information is moving? Requests, let's say, for more information. And these are very targeted. Why? Because the consumers want to place orders. So they want to make informed decisions. So once they know, now they're ready to place orders. So the third object is the placement of orders. This is a simple app that simply captures orders. People already know what they want. So what do they have to do? We tell them, number 1, select. Number 2, check out. Number 3, pay. Number 4, um, you know, you can say receive the let's just say place the order. Number 4 is place the order. So once you place the order, then you start tracking the order. All right. So that takes you to activity number 5, where you receive the order. You receive the order. So placing the order is an activity here, receiving the order is an activity here. Here, the consumer is expected to terminate the order, either by saying it's okay or it's not okay. If it's okay, thank you very much. Here's an advertisement on the next order. You see, that's how it goes. So this is coming up. If you like this, you will likely be interested in this on Sunday. Something new, something fresh, something you'd like. You see, we're advertising. If they're unhappy and complaining, connect them to the person in the restaurant who's going to deal with their complaint. Okay? Now, the restaurant will determine that. It could be in the restaurant, could be somewhere else, but they are connected to someone who will listen to their complaint so that they can respond to it. All right? It might be on pricing, it might be on expectation, it might be on the order itself. So those are the 5 objects. And then the arrows show the information that's moving across the system. You see, we're not dealing in pizzas or food. We're dealing in information. And the information is mapping itself to the orders, the food itself. All right? That's the mental model. So you can make it circular. You can make it have a center if you like, and things are going out and coming back. It's up to you how you visualize it. But it's a simple diagram that shows the objects in a structural way and the connections between these objects by way of arrows. The client is interested in traffic. So when you're showing all this, you're really moving the traffic towards the restaurant so that we can now build a business case around the mental model. We can say that the number of people we're going to end up with by the end of the month is 10,000 orders or 10,000 people. Maybe in total, we'll end up with 5,000 orders by the end of the month. You see, so we can build a business case around the mental model. So it's like that. All the objects you're using are icons. They're not fancy drawings. They're icons, and people should interpret the icons in a straightforward way. So you have an icon, let's say, for the business. You have an icon, let's say, for the placing of orders. You have an icon for, let's say, the delivery of the food and termination. And then you have icons. So every one of these objects has its own icon. And then the arrows are standardized. And then you have icons of people to show how you have many people, they become less, and you keep on moving the people around like that. Okay, so next meeting is about to start. Yeah, Nicholas, hi. So we're not yet done with this one, but we're almost ending. We're starting the next meeting when people start coming. Yeah, Nelly, you have another question maybe you want to ask on this?
No, no question.
Okay, it's clear a bit on the mental model.
Yes, I've understood.
Okay, so as a graphics person, for skills to present something or prepare something that will be not only clear, understandable, but somehow interesting to look at. Always be a designer about it. Don't now produce something that has design problems. No, it must be visually done well. But from a design perspective, you need to communicate. You need to use color, images in ways that are utilitarian, useful. Don't be an artist, for example. If you start being an artist when you're a designer, you make mistakes. No, you be designer about it. Things must be understood. When people look at your icons, they'll know what they are. Label everything. Even when you design, and we know it's a mental model, call it a mental model. And then give it a name that makes sense. Mental model is a very technical name. So give it a name, mental model of, and then give it a name. Okay? So that it looks like a professional document. The client's going to see these things. They don't know what a mental model means. So you have to explain in English what it means. Everything must be in English, okay? In an understandable way to a non-professional. All right? So in terms of the deadlines, next week is an important one because once you do the persona profile, all this is going out to them. Then thereafter, you have to work steadily towards the prototype. The client will weigh in on what we give them, but they will now be very keen on the prototype. So within 2 weeks, we need to have that prototype out. You see, so you front load as much as you can. Like if you can do the scenario drawings and use case diagrams and user stories quickly based on the big idea, you can spend more time now working on the prototype because you've done this stuff earlier, quicker. Okay. All right then. Do you have other questions, maybe, or anything, maybe that any other business, maybe that you'd like us to talk about? Mhm.
Not at the moment.
All right. So if you have anything that you want to talk about, let's say up, you can reach me, and then I'll clarify. But we aim for next Thursday to have the uh, for you to reach, I think, task 5. Yeah, and also fill out your book. I think I'll pick it up. You can send it to me. All
Okay.
right, Nelly. So thanks. Yeah, thanks for coming. We'll see you next week. I'll stop this video for now.